My name's Sasha Pete, and I'm joined by a fantastic individual, all the way from Scotland, Mr. John Stoddart, played for both St George and Captain New South Wales. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
So, John, tell us how you fell in love with our great game.
Well, obviously being Scottish, you're born in love with the game. It's all you had. The area I came from was, like most Scottish guys at that age, there was nothing there but football. So when you grew up, you had a ball at your feet. When you were born, your father had you as a 2-year-old running around the backyard with a football at your feet. So basically that was it. Everybody was in love with football because that's all you had. There was no cricket, there was no basketball, there was no surfing. It was football or nothing, basically. So that's simple. Like every other Scottish guy that I know that played football, it was just inbred in you. It just came naturally.
And when did you first start playing?
Well, obviously I started at school, primary school. Just you played for the school, you played on the Saturday morning, and then Sunday you played all day with your mates. At a certain age, you just went and played football. You joined a club. You played again. It was just football, football, football. So all my friends played football. I played football. You played it basically 6 days a week. You went to school. You took a ball with you. You went to the shops for your mum for shopping. You took a ball with you. You played at school at lunchtime. You had a tennis ball because the big balls weren't allowed. So that was just developed. There was no set coaching. It was just you learn by trial and error, basically.
Fantastic.
You know, you kicked a ball against the wall. You controlled it when it came back. You had balls that were uneven, so when the ball came off the wall, it was different angles. So you learned to control it with both feet, or your head, or your body, or whatever. You just made do with what you had to work with, you know.
And talk to me about your first team. What was your first junior club?
Well, my first boys' club was actually called the Crossroads Boy Club. And one of my teammates here was the late Sandy Jardine, who I knew as Billy Jardine. I never knew Sandy as Sandy. His name was Billy Jardine, who then, at that time, was signed with the Glasgow Rangers. And his uncle, a guy called Bob McCauley, was actually a scout for Rangers. And the club I played with, I was supposed to go to Rangers. But because I was brought up as a Catholic, in those days, they didn't sign Catholics. So that was knocked on the head from an early age. And that's when you realise at that age, religion came into it in Scotland. Not so much now, obviously, but in those days, you either played for a Catholic team or you played for a Protestant team. So, as I say, that was my very first knockback was supposed to go to Glasgow Rangers, and that was knocked on the head because of my religion at the time. Then from there, it was a graduation from the United Crossroads to what you call a junior team. Now, a junior team is not like here. A junior team in Scotland is like a preparation for senior soccer. It's a team where if a team like Rangers signed you, but you were too young to actually join the club at that time, they would farm you out to a junior club. Now, you signed for a junior club because if you didn't go to a junior club and you went directly from a boys' club to Rangers and you didn't make the grade, you couldn't go back to junior soccer, so you were virtually nowhere to play. And with junior soccer at that time, you could still get paid. And a lot of the old senior players who were sort of past their best, but still good players, came back to junior soccer, got a little bit of money, not much, but it was still something. And then when you were going up a grade, you went to juniors, and hopefully you went from juniors to your senior team. So when I was from the club, boys club, after a couple of years, I was contacted by Celtic. And they signed me on what was called professional forms. And they farmed me out to a team called Dalkeith Thistle, which is a junior team. So what I done was I played for the Dalkeith Thistle at the weekend. I trained with them twice a week. And then once a week, I went through to Glasgow to train with the Celtic team, the Celtic reserves or juniors or whoever was on. And that's basically where I went from the boys' club. But so in between that, before I went to Glasgow Celtic, my younger brother and I were invited down to Leicester City. I was 17, my brother was 15. And we spent 2 weeks at Leicester City. And it was absolutely fantastic. And that was just at the time that Peter Shilton, who was the younger goalkeeper then. And the senior keeper was Gordon Banks, who was the England goalkeeper. However, Gordon Banks was a lot older. He was more or less going out of the game.
Yep.
And Shilton was the up-and-coming goalkeeper. And from what I was told when I was there, Shilton said either he goes or I go, because I'm not going to be playing reserve team goal. So because of the age difference, Leicester decided it was better to move Gordon Banks on, and Shilton became the first team goalkeeper. So that was about the background there. So as a younger player, and when Shilton wanted extra work in the afternoons, he would get maybe 4 or 5 of us to go back in the afternoon and just practice shooting, crossing the ball for Shilton, because he wasn't the biggest of goalkeepers, Peter Shilton. He was lucky if he was under 6 foot, which is small at that time for England. The goalkeepers were all 6 foot 6, 6 foot 5. So he always concentrated on his height, and his when you took a cross ball, he always took it at the highest peak he could to make up for his lack of size. And if you notice, when Maradona scored with the hand of God, it's because Shilton was probably 3 or 4 inches too small to block the, the hand of God, as they call it, you know. But it was a fantastic experience. And then from there, we went back to Scotland, my brother and I. And in between us going back, my brother was actually signed with the Hibernian, our local team.
Yep.
We call them the Hibs, but they're the Hibernian. And that's when Celtic got in touch, and I was signing what they call provisional forms. So none of us went back to Leicester after that, because, as I say, I was with the Celtic and my brother Brian was with the Hibernians. And that's where we played our junior soccer in between, hoping to get called up. But because of the Celtic at that time had just won the European Cup, there was very little chance of me getting into the first team. If you looked at the Celtic reserve team, it was Kenny Dalglish and Danny McGrain and players of that calibre, Lou Macari. I thought, well, I'm going to be too old to play when I get into that team, you know. So after a couple of years at playing junior and just wasting time, I signed up for a team called Berwick Rangers. Mm-hmm. At that time, the previous year, they'd just beat the Glasgow Rangers in the Scottish Cup. So a lot of the Glasgow Rangers team were sold. They got rid of them because Berwick Rangers were in the 2nd division at the time. And that's when Sandy Jardine got his big move into the first team, because he moved on 4, 5, 6 players because they'd been knocked out of the Scottish Cup by the small Berwick Rangers. And as I say, the following year, I joined Berwick Rangers thinking, oh, this is a fair team. It was the worst move I ever made, really, because when I got there, the players that had been there or were there were basically players who were coming to the end of their careers.
Yep.
And they weren't looking forward because, you know, they were basically going out of the game, whereas I was just an up-and-coming. So I was hoping for a stepping stone to better things, and they were just playing basically for beer money, you know. So after about my 2nd year there, I thought, I've had enough of this. And at that time, my younger brother, a new coach came to the Hibs, the Hibernian team, and made a clear out all the younger players because he hadn't brought them in. They weren't his players, as it were. So my brother was given, along with a lot of other players, a free transfer, just out. So him and a couple of other friends, they said, we're going to South Africa. And I thought, yeah. But because of the South African, at that time, the apartheid, I thought, no, that's not for me. I wasn't happy with that stuff. So I thought, I had a friend who had played in Australia, but was back in South Africa, a guy called Billy McGilvery. So I contacted Billy and I said, look, I've got an offer from St. George in Australia, and I've got 2 offers in South Africa from Durban City and Durban United. And Billy says, look, if you've got an offer from St. George Budapest, take that. They're the best club in Australia. And he just elaborated on that. I thought, well, that'll do me. I'll go to Australia first. And if things change in South Africa, I can always go there. I was only 22 at the time. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, plenty of time. I thought, I'll go to Australia for a couple of years. And then, as I said, if things change, I'll go and join my brother and my mates in South Africa. So I did. I come to Australia. Frank Arrock was the coach at that time.
Yep.
So I joins up with St. George. Frank Arrock meets me at the airport, takes me to a people that were affiliated with the club. So you're going to be staying here for a few weeks to get settled. And I'd been travelling for 3 days because at that time they gave you a cheap ticket, which was about 10 bloody stops. You know, you go to every country in Asia basically to get to Sydney. It was a UTA, the French airline. The food was dreadful. It was all, you know, the French was garlic and butter, and I was, oh no. So I basically lived on dry biscuits for the trip.
Yep.
And then Frank dropped me off at the Pattersons. There was a family called the Pattersons, a lovely family. Dropped me off there in the morning. Said, right, I'll pick you up in the afternoon, 2 o'clock. I thought, pick me up? Yeah, we'll get your boots on and all that. So he came, picked me up, took me down to the Cars Park, which was our training ground, and then basically sounded me out, you know, knocking balls and take me on and this sort of stuff. And I thought, bloody hell, I've been traveling for 3 days. I haven't had to sleep. And then he says, right, we'll go back, see you tonight at training. So one of the players who was staying at this house too was a guy called Dougie Utiasenovic.
Yes.
So the first player I met at St George was Dougie. Now, I'm from Scotland, just off the plane, a very broad accent. Dougie, very poor English. He's Yugoslav, Serbian. He couldn't understand me. I couldn't understand him. Anyway, Dougie takes me to training that night where I met a few other guys, and of course there was Zaboni, there was Schaefer, Warren, and there was 2 Scots boys and an Irish guy. There was Billy Hamilton and Bobby Hogg and Jimmy Hearn, who was the Irish guy. So, of course, we could understand each other, no problem. But I thought, Jesus, who are these guys? And I was thinking, Australia, they'd be average sort of players. And then I find out 8 of the team were in the Australian squad.
Yep.
And I thought, Jesus. And of course, this was only a third of the season left. So these guys were flying. I'm way behind in fitness. I'm way behind in everything. I'm in a strange country. I've had 2 training sessions. He said, right, you're playing for the reserves on Sunday, which was unusual because I always played on a Saturday back home. So we go to Hurstville Oval, which was our local ground, pitch, with a cricket pitch in the middle. It's a velodrome, so there's a bicycle track round the pitch. So the fans were basically 50 yards away from the actual pitch. So I go on the ground and there's a cricket pitch. And I thought, what the hell is this? So, of course, when the keeper kicks the ball bounces 40 feet in the air. I've got boots, my feet are swollen, I'm getting blisters. I thought, oh, well, no, this is not good enough. This is not football. This is another game, you know?
Yeah.
And then, of course, you start getting used to it, you get more acclimatized. But at the end of the season, which was only 3 months for me, I thought, I'm going to go back to Scotland, bugger this. So I did, I went back to Scotland. Then I thought again, because at the end of the season, Frank Ulrich was leaving. And they brought in a new coach, Mike Johnson, an English guy who had played for Newcastle United in England. Had a good resume, but he'd always worked with young players, Michael. Anyway, I went back home, had a real think. I thought, nah, bugger it, I'm going to go back. So I paid my own way back. And I thought, the big difference really was a difference in fitness. There was no, I knew I was good enough, but my fitness levels were way behind the guys where I'd come out. So I thought, no, I'm going to go back and get a pre-season, get a good fitness in behind me. And came back, we went to Michael Johnson, said, right, I'm back. We went to the pre-season, had a good pre-season. And Mike had been over in Manchester, studying in Manchester City. And Michael brought back all these new fangled ideas about training, basically based on the Manchester City training. And there's a guy called Colin Bell, who was nicknamed Nadunsky after a racehorse. And Mike tried to get us guys who were part-timers, remember, to do the levels that the Manchester City players were doing. You know, they had to run so many kilometres and they had to do this, and they were doing exercises. And we thought, Mike, we've been working all day and we come here at night and we can't keep up with these levels that you're trying to set for everybody. And he was threatening to drop some of the older players because they couldn't do so many 400 metres in so many minutes. And we started off the season on a bad foot, and some of the players were, didn't like him. And cut a long story short, eventually we had a few bad results, and the players had a meeting. Not me, because I'm just a new player, but the senior player said, nah, he has to go, basically. And that's when John Warren and Manfred Schaefer took over the running of the club.
Yep.
And then I think we run them, but we didn't lose a game after that. After Michael was given the sack, we went on a run. We never lost a game that year after that. So that was that episode. And then on my 4th year at St George, I got an offer to go to Hong Kong, and my contract was up at the end of the '76 season. So a guy called Tommy Anderson, who was a local newspaper reporter for the Daily Mirror, Scots guy who'd actually played for St George, he phoned me and said, "Oh, look, Stoddy, I know your contract's up at the end of the year." I said, "Oh yeah." I didn't know how you know, but he knew. He said, "I've got a guy coming from Hong Kong. He's looking for players for clubs in Hong Kong." I thought, yeah, why not? Anyway, we went to a meeting at a place called Five Dock. And when I got there must have been 30 players from different clubs, all looking for contracts in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And so we're in this hotel, and we go into a room where we're meeting. The guy from Hong Kong was a guy called Robin Park. And Robin was the editor for the South China Morning Post, an Irish guy, but he lived in Hong Kong for 25 years. Anyway, we sat down, had a discussion, talked contracts. So I got, agreed on a contract. And then as we were leaving, Terry Butler from Apia had also joined the same club as me. But before we left, Tommy says to us, "Now look, keep this quiet. We don't want anybody knowing about this because it's hush hush." I said, "Of course, yeah." So I went back home. Next day I go to work. In the afternoon, one of my mates comes up to me and says, "Have you seen the afternoon paper?" I said, "No." And on the back page, huge splurge on back page, Hong Kong raid. Stoddart signs for Hong Kong club. Of course, I hadn't told anybody. I hadn't told Warner Schaefer. I hadn't told my boss where I was working. All of a sudden, it splashed across the evening paper, So,
yeah.
Of course, I'm training that night, and I get down to training, and there's Schaefer and Warren, faces like thunder. "What's this?" I said, "Well, it's my career. It's my job. It's an offer I got, which is." Don't forget, the money was double what I was getting here. They were paying all my accommodation. The tax rate in Hong Kong at the time was 3%. So it was an offer too good to refuse. Excuse me. And I said, "Well, my contract's up. It was coming towards the end of the season with the grand finals." I said, "So I'm taking the offer. You guys haven't offered me another contract yet." "Well, we were going to offer you this." I said, "Yeah, but you didn't." So anyway, I said, "It's all signed and sealed." So what they done was, after that, suddenly I became a bench player.
Yes.
So we're up to the semi-finals. And then Manfred came to me and said, "Oh, look, we're not going to use you for the semi-finals or the finals." I said, "Well, what's the point of me staying then?" He says, "Okay, I'll talk to the board about letting you go early." So he came to my place that night. He said, "Look, I've spoken to the board. They've agreed, but you must sign these forms saying we don't owe you any money, we don't owe you this," which was a lie because they owed me part of my contract money. There was also money for various bonuses, but I just signed it. I said, "Yeah, fine." And I phoned up the guy in Hong Kong and explained this is what was happening. He says, "Whatever they take off you, we'll make up for." So it was a no-brainer. So I signed the forms. That was me finished with St George. And then a week later, I was in Hong Kong. And
So,
it was... jump in.
Study, you could talk underwater, mate. So talk to me about that 74 grand final. So St George versus Hakoah. I think there was probably a 10 or 12 Socceroos in that game. So Jimmy Fraser for you, George Harris, Manfred Schaefer, as you said, Dougie, Harry Williams, Brendan Gross, Johnny Warren, Willie Hamilton, yourself, Atia Bonney, Terry Smith, and for the Hakoah side. So absolute quality on both sides.
It was full of internationals, basically. Yeah.
Martin Coe, Greg Lynch, Alan Marnock, Johnny Watkiss, Henry Mowbray, Jimmy Mackay, Johnny Watson, Agenor Munez, Hilton Silva, Murray Barnes, and Joe Fletcher. And talk to me about, that's probably one of the greatest grand finals in the 70s, from what I've heard. You were on the pitch.
Yep.
So tell me about the build-up to that game, and tell me about what transpired, the energy, and take us back to 1974.
Well, the game was on a Sunday. On a Saturday, I got the flu, bad. And I came to the game on a Sunday and spoke to John and Manfred. I said, "Look, I've been up all night, I'm feeling ill, and they say, look, go on the park, give us what you can, and then we can substitute you. And say, don't tell anybody else, keep it quiet from the rest of the boys, because we don't upset them, sort of thing. So I did, and as it transpired, when I was on the park, I set up the first goal and had a couple of good chances, and I lasted 65, 70 minutes. But the lead up was with St George. It was we didn't speak to opposition. In the tunnel you got people shaking hands, and we were always told after the game you can do what you like. Before the game, walking out in the park, could have been your brother, you wouldn't speak to them. Mm-hmm. Because as Johnny Warren was always saying, his team talks about a blackboard. This is what you get for a win. This is what you get for a loss. This guy in this opposite dressing room is trying to take your money off you. He's trying to take the money and food out of your kid's mouth. This is how it was. So you thought, it wasn't about the football side of it. It was what they're trying to do to you and what you've got to do to try and stop them. So they were the enemy. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with this stuff. It's like Roy Keane with Man U, how he treated players. No, he's not your friend. Even in training, like if there's 6 midfielders and only 3 spots, and you're training against you, he's not your friend in training. He's not Jimmy Hellman wasn't my friend, or Jimmy Hearn or Woggy Hogg. They weren't my friends at training. They're after my spot, I'm after their spot. Then anyway, back to the 74 grand final. As I say, in the tunnel, I knew these ACO players. Joe Watson's a good friend of mine, and a few of the players. I wouldn't speak to Joe before the game or during the game. After the game, I'll cuddle him, I'll hug him, shake him. Before and during, you're not my friend. Mm-hmm. This cup is for me. The bonus is for me. The win is for me or for my club. Yeah. So that was the attitude. And but as I say, I was crooked. Anyway, I got through 60, 75 minutes. The game was, the funny thing about that game, there was never a trainer on the park the whole 90 and plus extra time. No player went down injured. Nobody had treatment. And you'll never see another game in these conditions where somebody's on the park at one time, or trainer or whatever, or goes down injured, rolling about. I've got the DVD at home, black and white, of course. And the funny thing is, there was a very tough game, but nobody went down injured long enough to have a trainer on the park, which is unheard of. I don't think you'll ever see it, or have seen it since. But the game itself was just brutal. It was just non-stop action. The game itself is just non-stop. Action from left to right, left to right. Tony Bosevich was the referee, who was a very strict referee. Goals were high-class goals. Football was fantastic. And as you said, I think it was the best grand final I've ever seen. Yeah. But that's my memory of that so far.
Because you also represented New South Wales.
Yeah.
And obviously seen some quality, quality side. When New South Wales would play another state, you're talking about the pinnacle of the state playing, equal to that of Socceroos quality. So talk to me about some of those state games that you played in, and you also played opposition clubs that would come and play against you. So talk to me.
Yeah, well, we played at the end of the season, a competition where the top 4 from Sydney or New South Wales played the top 4 in Melbourne. That only lasted one season, and 2 Sydney clubs finished first and second, which was Marconi and St George. And Marconi won the grand final, as it were, at the end of that. That only lasted 1 year. The only New South Wales game I played in was the one against Dinamo Zagreb.
Yep.
Which was Rally Rasic was the coach. And the thing about that was the Sir Arthur George, who was the head of the Australian Soccer Federation, didn't actually want Rally to be the coach because they had a falling out. And he tried to get a guy called Carl Rodney, who was the New South Wales boss. And they said, we don't want Rally. And he said, well, I run New South Wales, not you. So we want Rally, and we want Otti Alboni to be his assistant. Mm-hmm. Because Sir Arthur George wanted a guy called Jim Shoulder, who they had appointed the national coach, over Rally, and also over Johnny Warren, who had applied for the job at the time. But because the Sir Arthur was a bit of a bully, he tried to bully Cal Rodney into actually making Jimmy Shoulder the coach for the New South Wales game. And Cal Rodney, as I said, no, I'm having Raleigh and we're having Bonnie as assistant. So Raleigh actually got the New South Wales job before Jimmy Shoulder did, who was the national coach. And then Dynamo Zagreb, previous to that, had played the full Australian team over in Europe and flogged them 4-0. So they were expecting to come to Sydney and beat the state team, who, according to them, were a lesser team than the Australian team, the national team. But we actually ended up beating Zagreb 2-1.
Yes.
Johnny Kosmina got both goals. And the funny thing was, after the game, the Zagreb coach says to Raleigh, "You so-and-so, you tricked us. This is the real national team." So he thought we were a better team than the national team, which was funny because we were actually a mix of NSL and State League players. It was because with New South Wales, obviously, we wanted some State League players in. But it was a fantastic match, and they were a very good team, but so were we. And see, Raleigh had a good knack of picking players that complemented each other.
Yes.
Not necessarily the best of players all the time, but the best players for their positions in that particular game, which was his strength with the national team when he took them to the '74 World Cup. Some of the players may not have been the best players, but they were the best players for that team. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, chemistry.
You know, chemistry, the blend, yep. And that's Raleigh's strength. He's always been very good at picking players for that particular moment, you know. And as you know, Raleigh and I have been friends for many years. And as I say, when Leicester and George went to Hong Kong, it was full-time soccer. There was no work. It was just you trained, you played, you trained, you played. And then because they only had 2 grounds in Hong Kong, you might play 3 games in 10 days, then have a week off. Okay. So you could always watch a game. Every night you could watch a game because there was only 2 pitches. So but that absolutely fantastic time. The people over there were fantastic. Unbelievable, looked after you. We had accommodation paid, great wages. They took you out for a meal every night of the week. Couldn't fault it, you know. And then that was after that I got the offer from Canberra to come back to Canberra, from Johnny Warren, got the job at Canberra. Mm-hmm. And then he contacted me and said, "I've got this job. There's a new competition starting," which was the NSL. Then it was the Phillips League.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'm not going to be staying forever in Hong Kong. So I thought, this sounds good. I was told I had a job ready with a car, all ready to go, blah, blah, blah. I signed a contract, came back to Canberra. Disaster. Disaster. Absolute disaster. I got back to Canberra. And when Warren contacted me, he said, "Oh, I'm looking for players." I said to him then, "Well, my brother's in South Africa and he might be interested and he'd have some players." And that's when he came over, a guy called John Brown, who was from Edinburgh as well, but Johnny had been with the Hearts before. He came over, Tony Henderson came over, Ronnie Tilsted, they all came over to Canberra around about the same time. And we all met up in Canberra. And I get there and see, where's the president was a guy called David Dillon. So he turned up at the motel we were told to meet. And I said, where's Johnny Warren? He says, "Oh, in South America." I said, "South America?" I said, "Well, the season starts in 6 weeks." So basically this was the team we had. Players that come from South Africa, myself, and a couple of young guys. And John Warren's not even there. He's in Brazil or who knows, Argentina. The president didn't even know where he was exactly. So I said to him, "Well, when do I start this job?" And "What job?" I said, "I'm supposed to be working for a company called Philip Morris." It was a cigarette company. I said, "I was told I've got this job," it's in the fax at the time. "I've got a job to start with Philip Morris, a car, blah, blah." "Oh, I don't know anything about that." Anyway, again, to cut a long story short, there was no job. And they said, "Well, we're thinking you might want to buy a milk round." I said, "You want me to buy a milk round?" You're talking thousands of dollars for me to buy a milk round. I'm in a state I don't know anything about, a state, Canberra. I says, no, that's not the agreement. So I moved back to Sydney.
Yep.
So the agreement was I trained in Sydney and played for Canberra at the weekends. And luckily I went back to my old employer and got my job back. So for a while I was training with a local club called Sutherland.
Yes.
And then on the weekend I would fly down to Canberra or drive down with they signed a goalkeeper called Malcolm Haynes, who was from Sutherland. So Malcolm and I would either drive down or would fly to Melbourne or fly to wherever we were playing. If it was Canberra, we usually drove down. And I'd done that for a while, but that was obviously, and then the money dried up with Canberra. I wasn't getting paid. And so I said, well, this is not good. And so eventually I just said, I'm not coming down unless I get paid, which is, I'm a professional. I'm not an amateur, I'm a professional. Every week I play, I'm not getting paid. I'm behind the 8 ball. And it didn't look any better. So eventually it came to that I said, I'm leaving. I'm not. And then Canberra tried to make out that I had left without permission. The Australian Soccer Federation called me and says, John, we've got a complaint from Canberra that you've broken your contract. And I said, I've broken my contract. How's that? Well, you've left Canberra without permission. I said, really? So I went to Sutherland because what had happened, and somebody forgot, obviously, before I could train with Sutherland, I had to get a clearance from Canberra to say that their insurance would cover any injuries I got out while training with Sutherland.
Yep.
So somebody had forgotten, who I don't know, let's not say, well, say I do know, but I'm not going to say who it was. And actually given me a letter signed by him to say, we will cover any injuries John receives, blah, 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 blah. And thank you for allowing him to train with you. So I've turned up at the Australian Soccer Federation with a letter in tow. And the guy at the time was called Brian Lefebvre. He says, Johnny, this is, I said, well, here, have a look at this letter, Brian. And he went, oh, geez. Okay. He said, well, David Dillon, the president, and John Warren are supposed to be here shortly. Anyway, David Dillon turned up, who's the president of Canberra. And they brought him in and said, right, Mr. Dillon, your team is saying that John left Canberra without permission. Yes. He said, well, have a look at this letter. And the poor guy's face went white. He went, oh, well, we had no knowledge of this letter. So he says, so obviously John is not in breach of his contract, but in actual fact, Canberra are in breach of the contract because you haven't paid John for so many weeks. They said, okay, so 10 minutes later, they called in David Dillon and said, right, the decision is John is now a free player. You broke his contract. If John wants to go after you for the money that you owe him, that's up to John. We can't make you do it, he said. But from now on, he is now a free player. So which was what happened. After that, I was a free player.
And did you end up going back to Hong Kong?
I did later on, yeah.
Yeah.
What I did was I played with Sutherland for that rest of that season.
Yep.
And then half the next season, I stayed with Sutherland. And then Dougie Usasenovich contacted me. He said, oh, John, I've got an offer from Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. I said, oh, yeah. What do you think? He says, and they want you to come back with me. And they asked me if I said, yes. So Dougie and I joined the same club in Hong Kong, awesome. Which was fantastic again. Again, beautiful flat over in that place in Kowloon, which is the other side of the island, where Bruce Lee came from. And it was actually where the army stayed. It was top class flats units. And there was another player came from Adelaide, a Yugoslav guy, who him and Dougie fought like cat and dog because for whatever reason. They just didn't seem to click. But Dougie and I had a fantastic time over there.
Yep.
Yeah. Obviously because of our background with each other. So we stayed there for probably 6 months, played the season in Hong Kong. And then we came back to Sydney. And about that time, Otti Aboni got the job at Melita Eagles,
yes.
State League team. Yes. So it was just like, because I was a free player, I was like a gun for hire. Mm-hmm. So I could just say, I'll go for this team, I'll go for that team. And then, of course, by then I realised from now on, as there was a clause in the contract, I could leave whenever I want, if I want, when I want, which was fantastic for me. So I joined Otti Aboni at Melita and one season there, and we won the competition then. Yep. We didn't win the grand final because we played Sydney Olympic And the last game of the season, we had to beat them to win the comp, which we did. But the grand final was against Olympic, and they bloody flogged us 4-0. And to tell the truth, they were a far better team than we were, but the Melita ground was a smaller, compact ground and didn't suit the Olympic team, really. So, and a good mate of mine, Kenny Wilson, was in that team at the time. And he always says it was Stoddart Melita, he calls it. Yeah, Stoddart Melita won that game. But as I say, we got flogged in the grand final because we played at the cricket ground, the sports ground, sorry, which was a big ground that suited them down to the tee. So we really, they deserved to win that game. And then that was the season with Melita. And then Otti left and got a job with a team called Riverwood, a brand new team. And then again, a Bonnie contacted me. I started the season with Melita, but because of that clause, I could leave anytime. Otti got the job with this team called Riverwood. He phoned me up and he says, I've got this job with Riverwood. I said, who the hell's Riverwood? And it was a new name for a team called Arncliffe Scots, who were a well-established state league team, but the guy that owned the club and was financing the club had started this new club called Riverwood. So Otti was getting new players from everywhere, basically raiding clubs to get new players in. So I got my clause from Melita and said, look, I'm leaving to join Otti. And again, the money was fantastic. And it was a state league club, but the owner was basically a millionaire. So Otti just said to me, what do you want? I said, well, what are you offering? He said, what do you want? Name a figure, right? It was like, just name a figure. So I did, and he says, you got it. I thought, geez, I wish I'd asked for more, you know. And that was me with Riverwood for Nabonnie again for that season. So that was basically the end of the time with Riverwood. That Riverwood club lasted 1 year. And it ended up, the guy that was financing everything was actually ripping off his company. He was an accountant.
Wow.
And he was transferring money from the company account into his account, which is why he always had a briefcase full of cash.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you wouldn't believe it. And the second season of Riverwood, we were to start training that night. I'll never forget it. It was a Thursday night because the local paper came out. And as I'm going up the stairs to my flat, getting ready to go to training for the first pre-season training for Riverwood, the headline was Riverwood owner arrested. So that was that guy. It's unbelievable the things that happened to me over my career. So I went to training, and of course, everything is in an uproar. But during the season, I had been contacted by the coach of Blacktown City,
yep,
who had grabbed me on the side and said, look, if you ever leave Riverwood, we want you here. And you wouldn't know it. At the end of that season, Riverwood's basically gone. So I phoned up a guy called Casey De Bruin, who was the coach at Blacktown. He said, because he knew, of course, everybody knew by then that the Riverwood were gone. He says, right, I want you here. Who else can you get me? So there was a guy called Barry Walker, a very good player, and a guy called John Davis. So three of us went to Blacktown that year, and we had a very good season at Blacktown. And then I had another season there, and then by that time I was 38-year-old.
yep.
So that was my career right through, basically, from woe to go, you know.
Fantastic.
So there are a few ups and downs, you know, but I wouldn't change it for the world, mate. Some of the things, you know. And there's things in between, of course, but you know, just too many.
You obviously played with some fantastic players in the 70s and 80s. Who stands out as you think, oh, I wish I had that person's engine or that person's flair? Who are the people that you saw on the pitch and thought, okay, maybe it's a Peter Wilson at the back who's like a tower, you know, hard but fair, or an Aginal Muniz who can just ping the ball from wherever he wants. Who are some of the players that you thought that were, when you saw them play, you just thought were outstanding?
Yeah, well, you get the guys you mentioned, obviously, Agi Muniz, but the guy I learned a lot of is not really known, really, a guy called Hector Martinez. Okay. I don't know if you've heard of Hector Martinez. Hector was at Melita when I was there. He had just come as well. The things he'd done in training, not in the game, because Hector always struggled with his fitness, but his skills was unbelievable. The way he would nutmeg players and the way you always learn. You can always learn, no matter what age you are. You can always learn things. And I used to watch Hector and think, never even think of doing that in a game, but Hector would do it. And I think if Hector had been really fit, he could have been a far better player. But, and of course, but always great players. Joe Watson, fantastic player. Adji could hit a free kick from 40 metres. There was a guy called Alan Ainsley who had a great left peg. Alan actually played for Berwick Rangers before I went there. He came to St George. I left Berwick, went to St George. Alan had just left St George to go to Western Suburbs. But Alan was from Berwick. He was from Berwick. But some of the players were just fantastic players, especially the South Americans.
Yes.
But one of the guys that was a fantastic player, who never gets mentioned in the same terms as Johnny Warren, was Ray Batts.
Oh.
Ray Batts, to me, well, Ray had been to Man United when he was younger and come back for homesickness, I believe. He would have been the player if he hadn't got the karate chop by that Uruguayan. But also guys like Johnny Watkins. Johnny was Johnny could play anywhere. You know, and these are guys that I played against. Peter Wilson was the hardest guy. I've been hit by a few hard players, but Peter put me up in the air once and I thought I'd been killed. You know, it was rock. But he wasn't a dirty player. He was just tough, just hard, big hard man. Of course, Dougie Utsenovic with Aboni. I mean, where do you stop? You know, where do you stop?
What was it like? Obviously, you talked about the time with Dougie not being able to understand him, but your time weaved with Dougie over time. So did you end up being able to communicate? He's broken Yugoslav English and your Scottish English. How did that meld together?
Well, you always learn a few words of different nationalities, Greek and Serbian and whatever. And I was always interested in, even when we went to Hong Kong, we could learn how to say good morning and your address. So you always pick up little bits. Yeah. And of course, because Dougie's in Australia and everybody's speaking English, he picks up English a lot quicker than I would pick up Serbian. But as I said, football's a universal language. You don't have to understand everything on a pitch. But if you make a run, you know a good player's going to find you. If you make a pass, he's going to. So you don't really need to understand somebody on the actual park itself. And I said over the years with Dougie and I, we just got used to each other. But we're talking about players. I can always talk about the guys I played with. But there's other players and other teams, not even well known, but fantastic players too. You know, really, really fantastic. And the thing was, when I came out, and Willie Hamilton, Bobby Hogg, and Jimmy Hearn, I was 22, 23 when I came out, not 33 and 34 like that. Nowadays, they're bringing out these so-called players from overseas and to join the A-League. 34, 35, 36. Why? You know, I'm coming at 23 and so are the other guys. We've got 10 more good years ahead of us. These guys got 1 or 2 years, if they're any good. Now, how many players have they brought out you could say were big successes? There's not many. Not many at all. But as I say, 72 when I came out, we were part-timers. We weren't full-timers. We had crap pitches. We were playing on cricket pitches. Look at these guys nowadays. They're playing on carpets. We were getting knocked down, flattened on the cricket pitches. We weren't rolling about injured. We got up, get on with it. You know, you see these guys nowadays, they just get touched and they fall over. If my father saw me go down and stay down for that, he would have left me so he can get you the bus home. He wouldn't drive me home. I mean, that's a fact. I'm not kidding. I'm being serious. My father said, if you go down, you better be injured. That was his attitude. If you go down and you stay down, you better be injured. Basically saying you better have a broken leg or something. If you don't get back up, you'll be in trouble. It's all different now.
When do you think it changed, that idea that you get hit and you roll over 10 times? Because to me, I really dislike those theatrics. I think it's un-Australian. In what moment or what years did you see that sort of theatrics to go down and to roll over and hold your head and hold your leg and that?
Well, it starts with the the FIFA and that, the new regulations and all this stuff, and the penalty box where they can grab each other and all this sort of stuff. If I was referee, there'd be 10 penalties a game. You can't give a penalty one time for somebody grabbing somebody and then not give it the next time for somebody. It's either you give it once or don't give it at all. I don't know when it happened with this stuff where you touch somebody and they fall over. If I'd been playing for St George and somebody in my team had got touched and fell over, I would pick him up or I'd kick him up the backside. I wouldn't stand for it. It was just it's a sign of weakness, in my opinion. And all this stuff now, if somebody gets a free kick and a player runs up to the referee and says, "Give him a yellow card," I'd give him a slap. I'd give him a slap, mate. I mean, we didn't have that. Like I said, in the 74 grand final with Hakoah, and there was a lot of good, hard and tough tackles, nobody stayed down. You got down, you got up. You got down, you got up. There was no trainers on the park. That shows you the difference. Show me one game now where you see a player going down and they get up and they've got a grimace in their face and they're complaining. And next minute they're up taking free kicks or, give me a break. Yeah. Really. I mean, I look at the rugby league players, they get creamed. They don't even blink. And that's how it should be. Like my father said, if you get hurt, you better stay down. Because if you get touched and you fall down, you'll be getting the bus home.
What advice do you have for the young player now coming up who loves the game, that wants to progress and play football at the highest possible level? Talk to me as though you're talking to the 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kid.
Yep.
What do they need to do?
You've got to commit 100%. You can't have it both ways. You can't, if you want to be, you can be an average player if you want, do anything you want. You want to be the top or be the best you can be. You can't be surfing during the summer. You can't be playing basketball. You can't be playing this or the other. You be playing football, soccer, you want to call it. You play that every minute you can. You take the ball to bed with you. You go to the shops, take a ball with you. You go in the backyard, take a ball with you. It's a ball, a ball, a ball. Messi didn't have basketball. Pelé didn't have basketball. He didn't have cricket. He had a football. And it doesn't cost you anything. You buy a ball for $20, whatever. That's what you need. You don't need a partner. You can kick the ball against the wall and control it. You don't need two people. People say, I've nobody to play with. Kick against the wall. Throw the ball and head the ball against the wall. Like we done. I see now they're going to start banning the ball, heading the ball in UK for a certain age. Use a plastic ball. We didn't have a rubber ball when I was growing up, and we played in the school playground with a plastic ball. You headed the ball, you didn't even feel it, but you learn the technique. If you hit the ball properly, you're not going to hurt yourself. If you hit the ball, especially when you grew up with the leather ball with the lace in it, you didn't hit the ball properly, of course you're going to do damage. The ball was full of bloody water, it weighed a ton, it had a lace in the bloody middle of it. So it's a different altogether. But during the week, and we played in the school, it was with a plastic ball. So when you hit the ball, you couldn't even feel it, but you learned the technique. So when you learn, it's like everything else. If you've got a bad technique at anything, you're going to do damage to your leg or your arm or whatever. If you haven't got a good technique throwing a cricket ball, you're going to throw your shoulder out. Yeah. So it's simple. But see, people, especially now, they're starting to talk about, the coach is this and the coach is that. I said, yeah, but it starts with the player. I understand that like a lot of the fathers used to coach the junior teams now, and the fathers have come from a rugby league background. Well, that was wrong, because I coached a team and every player was kicking the ball with his toe, for God's sake, because the previous father would have been a rugby league man, So I had to basically teach them from day one. This was the 14-year-olds, a team called Forest Rangers, and not one of them could kick the ball properly with instep. They hadn't been taught that way. In fact, one of the players was a brilliant lad who could have been a good player. He was always late for training after school. And I said to him, where is he? He said, he plays golf every day after school. Anyway, I said to him, his name was Wayne Riley. Wayne actually won the Australian Open and the Scottish Open at golf.
Wow.
And I said to his parents, look, Wayne's always late for training. Let him play golf. And his parents were lovely people. He said, we want him to play football. I said, but he wants to play golf. I said, look, I'm quite happy to have him, because he was actually my best player. But I listened to my advice, and the following season, he didn't come back, and he concentrated on his golf. And then, as I said, he won the Scottish Open and the Australian Open and made a lot of money. He's now commentating in the UK, and his nickname's Radar. And I took my son to see him playing here in the Australian Open a few years later when he was a man. And he was on the putting green, and I had my cap on and sunglasses. And I hadn't seen him for 15 years probably. And he's putting. I shouted, "Still kicking the ball about, Wayne?" And he looked up and he came over and he went, "Yeah." He went, "How do you know?" And I said, "Because I coached you." He went, "Oh no, study." So we had a bit of a chat. He said, "I'm still a fat bugger, aren't I?" I said, "Yeah, but you've done all right for himself." That's just a thing of about, committing yourself to whatever sport you choose. Commit to 100%. You're not going to be a great player at basketball, soccer, cricket. Pick a sport and commit to it. And don't blame somebody else if you don't make it. Because unless you give 100%, you don't deserve to make it. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Even when I was with St. George, I would do my training, go home, and in between the TV commercials, I'd be on the carpet doing sit-ups, doing push-ups. And I would see how many I could do in between the program finishing, the commercial, and the program starting again. So in between my training, I was also doing 100 sit-ups minimum per night, every night.
Yeah.
Or push-ups or sit-up. And even during the close season, I go for a run every night.
Yeah.
Because you can't do it part-time.
Yeah. So this is any young player listening to this, study played at the highest possible level in Australia. So wise words. What do you have? What message do you have for us soccer lovers, football lovers? Obviously, you played at the highest possible level before I was born. So I was born in 1976.
Yep.
So I hear about these stories about all these great players are playing and getting this appreciation for greats of our game. And I think it's really important to honour football throughout the generations. What message do you have for the newer football lover?
Well, you got to appreciate what you have and what we didn't have, and we still got there. We had excuse. If you want to say we have an excuse. I had to play on cricket pitches, blah blah blah. You've got no excuse. You have got the best of everything. You've got the best. You've got technology. You've got this. You've got that. But then again, I don't believe in too much technology. I mean, you see these players now. They got the trackers on, and this player ran 12 kilometres. Yeah, but they were useless kilometres. This player ran 2 kilometres, but he scored twice and set up 3 goals. It's all you can go overboard with technology. I don't understand this VAR, the VAR, and all this. All right, it might right a wrong here and there, but it's bad for the game, I think, very bad. And the young players, look up the history. You've got YouTube. We didn't have that. Look at the old players. Look at some of the teams in YouTube from Melbourne. When I was in Sydney, which was a bonus because Raleigh was the national coach, the best teams were always classed as Sydney teams, and usually the Sydney team won out over the Melbourne teams or Adelaide teams in those days. But there were still some fantastic teams in Melbourne. There was a good mate of mine, Kenny Taylor, played for Heidelberg, and a lot of fantastic players in Melbourne. But we never heard of them really in Sydney. Billy Wojtek and Branko Bulovic, who came into the national team. Jimmy Campbell, a lot of guys, and good friends of mine, the Bannon brothers, Paddy Bannon, who sadly passed away, Jed Bannon, who played in South Africa, my brother, Vince Bannon. Many top players were in Melbourne and Adelaide. Fantastic Adelaide team that Melta, Sergio Melta, all these guys at different times. But the young ones, as I say, have got everything in their favour now.
Yeah.
But it's back to them. Don't ever blame somebody else if you don't make it. People say, "Oh, the coach doesn't like me." That's because you're not a good player. Basically, no coach is going to drop a great player. Believe me, unless he's an idiot. If you're not in the team, it's because the coach prefers somebody else. If you're not in the team, maybe somebody's training harder than you. If you're not in the team, maybe he's just a better player than you. But if you've given everything you've got and you still don't make it, you should still be happy.
Yes.
But if you've given half if you only give half, You deserve half, you know. And not everybody can be a Neymar, let's face it, or a Maradona. Just be the best you can. At anything you do, just do the best you can.
Fantastic wise words by the great John Stoddart. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, sir,
You're welcome.
for this time and sharing your story. You accomplished a lot in your football career, and great wise words for any young player listening to this advice. Give it your best, commit 100%. You never know. You might play at the highest possible level. So thank you once again, Stoddy.
And thanks for you, and keep up the good work. You're doing a wonderful job.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you.